Okay, so we're live. So hi everyone. Thank you for joining our live stream. My name is Lana Lee, and I'm running for District 24, and I'm here with Vic Kaplan, who's running for New Jersey Governor. We try to go live as much as we can. This week we're going live today, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. We do have a guest lined up for the other 2 days. And if you have any questions, you can put it in the chat. You can email me. You can send me a message. You can also request to join our live stream through the same channels. But other than that, we're just going to sit here and chat about news that has happened. A lot has happened in the last week, and today is Constitution Day. So happy Constitution Day, Vic.
Thank you. Likewise, yes, happy Constitution Day. It's certainly been a while, but we're back, and definitely looking forward to the conversation concerning regarding the events that have taken place, I guess, over the last days or so. So, and yes, it is Constitution Day, so definitely happy Constitution Day to everyone. So,
sorry, I disappeared for a second.
All right.
So, in honor of Constitution Day, what is your favorite thing about it and your least favorite thing, if you can narrow it down to one?
Sure. Well, I would say that the favorite thing about the Constitution Day. I mean, I do like the Constitution, of course. I like the fact, of course, I like the Constitution, but I've always believed, of course, that our natural rights that's something that we're born with. They do not come from the Constitution. So even if the Constitution did not exist, certainly we would still have our natural rights to life, liberty, and property. But having said that, the Constitution is important, certainly, because it does list the restrictions on what the government cannot do, right? And I think from that perspective, that is very important. I certainly think that having a constitution is better than not having a constitution, in the sense that certainly in countries that don't have a written constitution, it's much more easier, I think, for the state, for the government to violate individual rights. You don't have any kind of document to say that what the government is doing is unconstitutional. I mean, if you don't have a constitution, that kind of one cannot raise those arguments, right? So at least having, I think in that sense, having a document that is supposed to limit the power of the state, I think is definitely a good thing for sure.
Yeah, and I've seen a lot of posts from people today, celebrating Constitution Day, saying, I'm so grateful for the rights that it grants me. Well, it doesn't grant you rights. It's a piece of paper, right? You already have those rights. Like you said, it only limits what a state or government can do. So it kind of enshrines them into existence in the society that we live in. So lots have happened. Lots of stuff has happened in the last 2 weeks. Lots of really, really horrible things. We had that young lady who was murdered on the train. Charlie Kirk was assassinated. Two college. I forget how old they were, but students who were black were found hung in front of the university by a tree. So much going on, so much violence, so much horrible so many horrible events going on. What are your kind of opening thoughts about those things?
Well, yes, no, thank you, Lana, for sharing that. Certainly a lot of bad things have happened over the last few weeks. Certainly that lady that got killed in North Carolina, that's a very tragic event. She was killed, and she had no idea. Obviously, this was going to happen to her. Very very tragic that this happened. For the college students that were killed, that's absolutely horrible. Even just the way they were killed is brings back some really definitely bad certainly recollections from our own history, where such practices were sadly more common. And it's absolutely tragic. And of course, the assassination of Charlie Kirk, the act of political violence, the assassination is definitely not something that it's definitely something we can all agree has no place in the political discourse. So that was a very tragic act. He did exercise his free speech. He certainly believed in that, and regardless of what one did think or about him, he certainly should not have been assassinated for exercising his free speech. That's for sure.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I one thing that I'm starting to really notice, especially with these events happening one or after the other, is that yes, I mean people need to acknowledge that these things happen, and it needs to be in the news, because we can't really be sheltered to the violence that happens. However, I notice that we tend to um, like engagement farm from these horrible events, and I feel like it's not only disrespectful, but some of the things, especially surrounding Charlie Kirk and that young lady that died, or was murdered, excuse me. I just feel like it's being blown to this media skeptical to the point of being disrespectful, to the point where we've kind of lost the plot. Charlie Kirk died expressing his First Amendment, and this is actually quite apt to talk about because it's Constitution Day. Um, Expressing his First Amendment rights or protected rights, and now we have people who are trying to prevent other people from expressing their First Amendment right, their freedom of speech. For example, I will upload. I got kicked out and I had it all ready to go, but I got to upload it again. I'm going to play this clip here.
And then there's hate speech. And there is no place, especially now, especially after what happened to Charlie, in our society.
Do you see more law enforcement going after these groups who are using hate speech and putting cuffs on people so we show them that some action is better than no action?
We will absolutely target you, go after you, if you are targeting anyone with hate speech, anything. And that's across the aisle.
So obviously that is somebody who is in government saying that law enforcement is going to go after people who are saying things that are going to obviously arbitrarily be labeled as hate speech.
No, yeah, no, I did hear that. And I mean, I guess the question becomes, what is hate speech? I mean, expressing one's viewpoint, whether one agrees with it or not, does that, is that something that should be criminalized? I mean, clearly, just because one disagrees with another person on any one issue, that doesn't. I mean, does that make it hate speech? I guess that's really the question. And one can have a political opinion that other people may disagree with, but but if somebody, if the government, if the state calls it hate speech, then it becomes criminalized. But then the question is, how do you define hate speech? I mean, what is hate speech, right? So I'm always concerned is that what I'm concerned about is that the idea that I mean, when it comes to hate speech laws themselves, is that when it comes to committing a crime, the crime itself obviously it should be something that should be criminalized, of course. And if it's violent crimes, it should be criminalized to the highest extent of the law. But if someone commits a crime and that person has particular hate inside of that person, does that make it how does that make it a crime? So how does making a speech, using speech or using hatred to commit a crime, with the crime itself, the violent crime, for example, itself, or any kind of vandalism is already criminalized, why should it be more of a crime than it already is? To me, that just doesn't seem to make a whole lot of sense. I mean, I've never agreed with these types of laws, because I've always believed that the crime itself is something that should be criminalized, not the thoughts that go into actually committing the crime, right? So if someone murders another person, may God forbid, but if somebody murders another person, to me, that should be, obviously that's murder, and that should be punished to the highest extent of the law. But if the person did it because that person hated that particular individual or hated a particular group of people, whether it's an ethnic group or it was a racial group, that really shouldn't be added to it. To me, that's kind of totally redundant, because to me, the violent crime, the murder itself, should be should be punished to the highest extent of the law. So I don't understand this whole idea that, first of all, most of the crimes are not punished out of love. There are hate crimes by definition, because I don't know of anyone who actually, most people commit crimes because they do hate the person that they're committing a crime against. So the idea that you're going to, add an extra layer to it, to me, just never made any sense by definition.
Yes, I agree with you. I'm sorry about the interruption. I was trying to look for a video that I had ready to go before, but I also want to correct myself because I mentioned several violent, events that happened last week. But what I didn't mention was the school shooting that happened the same day that Charlie Kirk was assassinated. And I think, I apologize for that, because I think that's part of my overall point is that this particular event has overshadowed all the news that has happened in the last week. And I think that's unfair. I mean, those children, were murdered that day, and we also need to remember them and honor them and respect their deaths. But to your point, go ahead.
No, absolutely. Please continue. I apologize for that.
But to your point, you're right. Who's deciding what is hate speech and what isn't? And, as libertarians, we only think that something should be criminalized if it creates a victim. And obviously having a wretched thought is not necessarily creating a victim, at least from my perspective, or even saying something hateful is not creating a victim. I think there's an argument to say that things like direct threats could be criminalized, and they do when it comes to elected officials and things like that. Like, you do get investigated when you say you're going to assassinate a political official or something like that. So threats, I think, kind of enter this gray area, direct threats. But just saying I don't like someone, or someone's a bad person, or cursing at somebody, that is 100% protected under the First Amendment, and you have that freedom of speech. In fact, I talk about this a lot, but in New Jersey we have something called disorderly conduct. Most states have something like that. And in that says that if you curse at someone or yell at someone, the way they write it is very vague, but basically if you're just being mean to someone or a cop, they can arrest you for disorderly conduct. And that is, I believe, a violation of the First Amendment. And New Jersey shouldn't have that ability to arrest people because they're cursing at someone, at least in a public space. So I think it's very alarming that we have people in the current administration and in Congress actively trying to punish people for criticizing Charlie Kirk, which is, I guess, even if from anyone's perspective, dishonoring, I guess, what his legacy was, which was defending freedom of speech and open debate and things like that. So I do agree with you.
Right, absolutely. I mean, that because hate crime becomes a thought crime, so you're being punished for the thoughts you're expressing, and why should that be a crime? After all, I mean, that is something that is, freedom of speech, freedom of expression. So why should that be a crime? It just doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, and I do think hate crimes exist, as you mentioned earlier. You can aggress on somebody based on hateful, based on their race or their gender or whatever. But hate speech, while it could be hateful, is still protected. Free speech is hate speech. Hate speech is free speech. Whatever. So, yeah. The other thing,
if you want to hate a particular group of people and writes horrible things and about a particular race or ethnicity, that's covered by the First Amendment. That is free speech. But then if the person commits a crime, a crime, that the crime should be crime. The crime itself against the group, whether it's violent crime, a violent crime, that is something that should be. I apologize for that. That is something that should be punished, not the expression of a kind of a personal opinion. So that's how I feel about it. About that.
So what is your opinion of these people who are engaging in cancel culture, which is, you say something, well, first they said if you were celebrating death, but now it's just if you're just criticizing Charlie Kirk, and then going after, figuring out where they work and then getting them fired. What do you think about that?
Yeah, no, well, first of all, I'm totally against doxing people. I think that's a horrible act. There is now, I understand there's legislation to make it a crime in the state of New Jersey. So I think it should be a crime for sure, because we're talking about putting the at its worst, we're talking about putting the life of another person in danger just for expressing an opinion. So that is not that is not where I think we want to go as a society. I mean, that does put the life of a person in danger. So I understand that currently in New Jersey, and when it comes to doxing, there's no law against doxing per se, but there certainly one can be prosecuted for harassment. And so I do believe that doxing, even though it's currently not a crime in New Jersey, I definitely think it should be a crime, because you're talking about someone who whose livelihood or whose life can be placed at risk just because somebody does not agree with their opinions. And I don't think we want to go down that road as a society. I know it may sound naive, and I'm somebody who remembers the '90s, and there's a part of me that kind of wants to go back to that time when people just agreed to disagree, and not to think that just because one person disagrees with another person, that person is a evil human being who wants to destroy the country, which seems like that unfortunately is more of a popular opinion now than it ever used to be before. So
I do agree with the sentiment. I do think that, for example, if my favorite coffee shop that I go to, or the store that I go to down the street to get my snacks, if I found out that the owner of that establishment was a misogynist or something like that, or a racist, I would want to know, and also I would probably stop purchasing things there. And I do think that boycotting needs to be more of a thing, so that we can control who we're purchasing from, and kind of making demands on the side of the consumer, as opposed to them controlling everything as far as what ingredients are instead of the state controlling like ingredients and things, or what's being sold and what's allowed to be sold. The consumer would control it. So I do support boycotting to a degree, but I do think that we cross a line when someone owns a business or is working somewhere that you're familiar with, and then we uh, put out all their private information. And maybe it's not even private, maybe it's just all their information: where their kids go to school, where they work, where they live, where do they go to the gym, and all the stuff that maybe is easily accessible on their personal pages. And frankly, all of our identifying information is very easily found on the internet. Nobody has privacy anymore. And I think that's something that more people need to be aware of. But some of this stuff is really easily accessible. But if you compile all that and then share it for the purposes of stalking, harassing, or doing harm because of somebody's opinion, I do think we've crossed the line at that point. But I guess we can argue all day, where the line is.
well,
But
if I could just interrupt you for a second. No, I totally agree with you. But of course, doxing is done for the purpose of causing harm to another person.
yes.
That's the difference. It's not just like some innocent, oh, we're just gonna put where the person is at. And this is different. Obviously the purpose is to get the person fired from his or her job, or worse, some crazy person may read that information and decide to use violence. Not necessarily crazy, but at this point it's you have people that are very much riled up. And I think clearly the purpose of doxing in this case is to kind of not just cause that person to be fired, but I think there are people that may just decide that, well, it's actual harassment. Well, harassment of that individual would be the way to go. I mean, I can so there's definitely an issue here, because of course, given how polarized our society is, it's not unthinkable that there would be people who would think that, well, if this person has expressed his or her opinion that they happen to disagree with, that some individuals will be more likely to use violence. And I'm honestly saying that this is a real serious concern of mine, because I have seen polls even from a few years back that do show that quite a lot of people, not quite a lot, but significant number of people do believe that violence is justified. And I for people regarding people they don't agree with. Now, obviously, we haven't seen a whole lot, like a lot of that, and thank God for that. But the fact that there's, that you have that number of people willing to agree with that, I think it's completely it's absolutely horrific. Just to believe that just because someone disagrees with you is that sometimes violence is justified. I can never. I mean, this is one thing that when it comes to the United States, when it comes to America, is something that most people, I mean, until I guess recently, really valued, that when that we live in a society where we resolve our political differences through elections, right, through protests, but not through violence. This is not how we resolve our political differences. And seeing those polls from a few years back showing that there's plenty of people who believe that the violence is justified against people they disagree with, yeah, I absolutely find that to be unconscionable. And I hope that when it comes to that public opinion changes, because that's not that's not a good sign. And I really hope that a society will never go down that road. So thanks.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I always always condemn political violence because I know what happens when we do go down that road. But I do want to point out that I feel like we could have a distorted view of what the American people as a whole, okay, I know we talk about individuals and not everyone's like this, but just kind of like the masses as a whole. I do believe that they have at least attempted, and for some people successfully conditioned us to believe that violence is justified. Because think of any war that the U.S. has enacted just in the last 100 years or so, and they do solve political issues, spreading democracy or whatever, with violence as a state. And then they convince the American population that it's justified. We see that with Israel and Palestine. We saw that during the Iraq wars, that all this justification for all this violence, and people were cheering it on, right? People were signing up to join the military in the early 2000s to, go kill the terrorists or whatever, because every Arab and every Muslim is a terrorist apparently, right? So I do think that there's a bit of conditioning to kind of cheer on violence when they tell us to cheer on violence.
Right. No, Lana, I do agree with you. I mean, there has definitely been some conditioning regarding that. I also think that it's. I mean, part of this, I think that it's been done on purpose in terms of trying to pin people against each other. This whole idea that if one side wins, that somehow it's going to be kind of the end of life on Earth, and people, I think, plenty of people have been conditioned to believe that if the other side wins, I mean, they're just going to destroy this country, and so we can't let those people win. And of course, it's not just the people that we elect, but it's also their supporters. Now, their supporters are responsible as well, just simply by voting for those candidates, and that's actually a horrific concept. It's never right to attack the people, but we've seen this happen now under different administrations, where the supporters of a particular candidate, they get portrayed as really that half of the country is literally evil, and they're composed of either people call them all kinds of names. And I am, I understand that the supporters of, any one side don't certainly see it that way. They don't see themselves as evil. It's that the people on the other side are saying that those people are evil. And I hope that this is just, I hope that there could be, we could see that disappear one way or another, because this is not getting us to any good place. I'd like to see, like I said, people resolve their differences peacefully. But I also understand that people's feelings are really riled up, precisely because, as quite a lot of people, we are kind of social animals, social creatures. And people like to belong, and people like to belong to one political party or another political party. Sorry about that. And so there's a tendency to support that political party and support that political leader, all the way. So now you're not even allowed to disagree with a particular political party or a particular political leader. and that is not something that has always been the case. I mean, I remember when there were Republicans that disagreed with the Republican president, Democrats that disagreed with the Democrat president, and you could do that. And there were Republicans that agreed with the Democrat president, and then vice versa. But we really see this heightened polarization, and just the rhetoric has definitely gotten a lot worse in the last few decades. And that's why I totally understand why people feel this way. But I also think that perhaps what is happening is that the people on each side, the supporters of any one political party, they may not understand why people on the other side see them the way they do. I think that's also because of that partisan loyalty that we see, that you can have supporters of a particular presidential candidate just not realizing just that not such a long time ago, those political views would have been considered to be extreme and completely not acceptable in any kind of polite society back in the day. And I think there's just a failure to understand that, and failure to reflect. And perhaps if there was more of that, then people could understand why people on the other side, just hate those positions so much.
Yeah, and I do think extremism on both sides is becoming much more mainstream, and the divide is getting much wider. I have been labeled a leftist. For example, there are certain people who are calling for leftists, which is a very broad term, to be put on a list or arrested or eradicated or killed. Right, I have seen that too. And then they label basically anyone who was ever critical of Charlie Kirk or ever critical of any Christian or conservative or anything like that leftist, which is obviously ridiculous. And so the tribalism is getting worse, and the calls for violence. And I've heard people be excited about a civil war, things like that. And anyone who's excited for war has never actually seen one, has never been in one, because how could you ever want that? But I do think it's really concerning that now we are condoning using the state to suppress speech, just because it's something you don't like. We're wishing for civil war at this point, and we're labeling people this really, really broad term if they disagree with anything you say, and then call for them to be eradicated. It's very concerning.
No, I totally agree with you. It is, and it's very, very unfortunate. It's this is. I mean, part of it. I think, like I said, I honestly think this is being done on purpose. I don't think this is accidental, because I think that in any kind of under normal circumstances, there would be people just asking to kind of dial things down, right? Not to hate an entire group of people, half of the country or the other. Like, there's got to be some kind of, I wish there was. So instead of kind of softening things and trying to calm things down, you have just kind of a rhetoric that is just completely uncalled for. So I wish there was more of that fiery rhetoric being used, describing the supporters of, not just supporters, but even the acts. It's fine. I think that some of the rhetoric, I mean, yes, I support free speech, but maybe some of those words that have been used to describe people on the other side, maybe that's not maybe it would be a good idea to just kind of dial things down, to just criticize people, not for for the positions they take, and certainly not attack people just based on their ethnicity, based on their race, and based on other things, which unfortunately I've seen definitely an increase of in the last decade or so. But I totally understand that when it comes to certain policies, it gets people very upset, because they see things happen that policy-wise, that are just absolutely upsetting, and I totally understand that. But I think there's definitely a proper way to deal with it. It's through litigation. If people don't agree with some of the laws that are have been passed, some of the bills that have been passed, or some of the legislation, but I think there's a time to kind of dial things down, and because I think that just makes the society more polarized and makes people hate on the other side more. And I just last thing I want to say about this, I really hope that more people, we could have a dialogue between people. People have different opinions, having a peaceful dialogue, without resorting to some of the rhetoric that that has been used in the past. I think that would be helpful.
And when we talk about differences of opinion, to me, a difference in a political opinion is, should taxes be higher? Should they be lower? Should they be eradicated? Right? How much privatization of education should happen? How much of it should be public? Whatever. Those are differences of opinion. But to me, like, yes, if you call for the eradication of an entire people based on their religion or their race, or if you think that some people are deserving of less fundamental rights than other people simply because of some identifier, I personally have the opinion that you're a bad person, and I'm allowed to think that.
Sure.
Right. So my next thing is, this is just more of an opinion. Do you think that certain people, or certain professions, I should say, or do certain professions have less of a right to free speech than others? For example, teachers and anyone in the medical field. So, teachers shape young minds. And then, in the medical field, you are obligated to treat people that maybe you don't like, or you hate, or you have a prejudice against. Do you think that those people should be losing their jobs because they had a criticism of Charlie Kirk, or because maybe they did celebrate his assassination? What is your opinion on that? Do certain professions have less freedom with their expression?
Yeah, no, I personally, my view is that when it comes to employment, I think, I think individuals generally, I think they should be free to express their own opinions. I think it has become sort of a different standard for people, for example, who serve in the military. I know they're not supposed to. You could correct me if you like people in the high positions, the generals, right? I know that has been a tradition, not to attack the president of the United States, for example, not to criticize, or kind of try to stay out of politics. And you could correct me on that. I believe that has been sort of the tradition, not to speak out against the president, for example, if one is, has a position of a general or colonel or an admiral. But I think when it comes to certain school teachers, my view is that if they're doing it on their own time, they're not. But I think they should be free to express their views. I think it becomes a distraction, though, when, of course, you have the parents kind of getting a hold of it, and now they have an issue, and then of course they can complain to the to the school, and that's why public school teachers, I know they're kind of expected to kind of stay out of. I know in the past, like, stay out of Facebook, right? Stay out of those things. But it's more, I think, to the point of not causing a controversy, because they are doing it outside of the school. So not causing a controversy, I think, more with the parents. So it's more of a kind of a protection against the parents, and the parents having those concerns, coming from public schools more than anything. But I think that the real issue here is that, and I can definitely go into this topic. But Charlie Kirk. So, he did believe certainly in exercising free speech. I don't disagree with that. But then the question becomes really is, can also one, and this is what had happened. The people had been kind of targeted, not just because they because of their attitude when it comes to his assassination, but also it came as a result of their views of him in terms of some of the speech that he expressed. And so, to me, that's, again, I do believe in the freedom of association when it comes to employers. And if an employer doesn't want to be, doesn't want to have anything to do with the employee based on that, well, that's, I think that's, I would like to think that should be something that would have to be spelled out in the contract. upon hiring. I don't, and Lana, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't believe that firing people based on their expression of political opinion outside of employment is something that in most cases would be a part of the contract. I don't believe that is. I'm trying to come up with it kind of from different perspective. I know that of course I do believe in freedom of association, but I also understand that there are such contracts. So I mean, I know that kind of I'm trying to give it a slightly different angle here.
Yeah, I mean, just to kind of maybe help shape the conversation. So with military, we actually, when we were at Sussex County Day, Vic, you remember on Sunday, 2 women did come up to us and ask us, if you were governor, if I was in the state assembly, would we lower the flag for Charlie Cook in honor of his death? Which I found to be an odd question, because they didn't come up to us and say, do you think political violence is okay? Or, how do you, which most people did, how are you planning on repealing income tax? They asked us about flag lowering, which I don't know. I think that question was at least interesting. But in that conversation, she did misspeak and say that military personnel swear an allegiance to the president, and they don't. They swear an allegiance to the Constitution. Now, military personnel, I have military in my family. My first husband was military, so I do have knowledge about this. They aren't allowed to have political opinions, as in like, I voted for Trump or I voted for Chase Oliver. Like, you can't announce that.
Right.
Because, military personnel are sometimes, they have access to information that we don't, and that could shape their political opinions, and then you sharing it as representing a military branch, it could turn into a mess. So they're not allowed to necessarily voice their political opinions. You kind of lose that freedom when you join the military. You lose a lot of freedoms, actually, when you join the military, so I don't suggest that you do to anyone. But they are allowed to have general opinions. I know I saw on Twitter or on X somebody in the military who was lower ranking, he wasn't like a general or anything, had a very, very mild criticism about him. He said, I condemn political violence, etc., like a whole paragraph of this, and then the last sentence is, but the guy had some hateful opinions, and I can understand why people don't have a whole lot of empathy for him. That is such a mild opinion, and apparently he's now on leave and potentially could be kicked out of the military. That you're, from my understanding, you're allowed to have. When it comes to school teachers, I get the outrage, because these people, you're sending your children to be influenced by these people for 8 hours a day. And when you hear them say something incredibly hateful, there's a fear that they're going to be instilling that into your child. Why it becomes a problem to me is because schools aren't private businesses, right? They are public, and they are funded by taxes. They get federal grants, right? So they're not entirely private. So like if the Taco Bell down the street, read their employee say something hateful and they fire them, that's totally within their right. They don't want an employee that talks like that online. That's a private business, but public school is not, right? So I think that's definitely maybe a broader conversation. I also agree with you that it needs to be in the contract, and you do sign contracts. It's not normally when you have an employment at CVS or Walmart or something like that, but a lot of employers do make you sign a contract. Some of them even have a morality clause. Some of them say that you can't post X, Y, and Z on social media. You can't be posting things of you doing drinking alcohol or doing anything like that, especially if you work around children. That might be in there. Or if you work for a Christian organization. I know that, I forget what it's called, but there's a pro-life organization that has a morality clause that you can't be seen online doing any of these things that they consider immoral. So you can make the choice to sign that contract, and then once you do, and you break the contract, then obviously they have the right to fire you. So there's a lot of circumstance that goes into does everyone actually have freedom of speech to say anything they want at any point?
No, absolutely, I agree with you. And also like that, I mean, there's definitely a difference between public schools and certainly and children and adults and the colleges and universities, because of course adults can pick and choose which classes they want to take, which colleges they want to attend. Children really don't have those choices. So there's a higher level of responsibility being placed on public school teachers than there are on college professors for that reason, because children just don't have that choice. And certainly, I think it's not just coming from the parents, and certainly if the students find out, right, that about the political opinions, somebody posted something that they found to be highly negative, that then the implication would be that, as you said correctly, that the teacher might be trying to kind of influence the mind of a child in a school. So that's something that the idea is certainly not to have that for sure at a public school setting.
Yeah,
But that's
and
why.
we
Yeah, I'm
see,
sorry. Go ahead.
we see other examples of this outside of like just expressing an opinion about a political event. But you have teachers that get fired who their OnlyFans is discovered, things like that, or some other, arbitrary, immorality that they have. And then there's the conversation of, do they have the right to be fired simply because they engage in sex work or they engage in other things? Or, there's a picture of them floating around smoking marijuana or something like that, and they get fired. I don't know. Like, I don't work for public education for a reason. I didn't join the military despite my family being in the military for a reason. Right. I've owned businesses in the past. I've managed businesses. And to me, it's like, once you step out the door, I don't care what you're doing or what your opinions are. I can also say I was an EMT and a firefighter when I lived in Texas. So I have worked in the medical industry. And you can have patients that are horrible. I've been spit on. I've had my hair pulled. A lot of these patients end up having dementia or something like that, which obviously you should have incredible sympathy for. But a lot of these patients simply are just racist or misogynistic. I was actively lifting somebody and he was saying that I was a woman and I shouldn't be in this job and I'm not strong enough as I was lifting him, as I was helping him, right? So you come across incredibly hateful people that are like actively trying to either physically harm you or just be mean to you while you're giving them aid. And you still have to, right? It's one of those positions where it's like, it doesn't matter. You got to give them aid. You have to treat them equally to any other patient. But do nurses and EMTs deserve to get fired simply because they didn't like Charlie Kirk? I don't think so. I personally don't think so, because I can think of several instances in which I didn't particularly like the person I was helping, but it was my job and my duty and my moral obligation to help that human being despite that. And you have to have that mindset when you enter those jobs anyway, because you will come across somebody that you consider to be hateful or a bad person or who treated you unkind or disrespectfully, and you still have to help them anyway. So from my perspective, with my experience, I don't necessarily think people in the medical industry should be fired simply because they had an opinion about someone, because I can guarantee you they have opinions about everyone they come across and they still give the exact same aid and treat everyone equally.
Sure, no, absolutely. I totally agree with you. Yeah, there was a doctor, I believe that the nurse, she was appalled at what the doctor said about Charlie Kirk. And because the nurse did really like Charlie Kirk, and the doctor was express his view towards about his death. But I just think that, quite a lot of people, the difference is that, that people have, I'm sure, have expressed their point of view, but it does appear as though I would think there's quite a lot of people. I mean, you're talking about probably millions, and like millions of people should be fired for expressing to their personal. I guess everything has become so politicized. Yeah, but that's and if the shoe was on the other foot, may God forbid, then I'm sure we would have seen there are people that are not liked by the Democrats. There are people who are not liked by the Republicans. I mean, we start firing people left and right for expressing their opinions. I mean, there's well, there's not going to be a whole lot of people working because quite a lot of people have opinions and strong opinions as well. So this is that's just a fact of life. And I also think I also understand that quite a lot of people don't see that. They don't believe that whatever the person that they like have expressed, they agree with it, so they don't see there's anything wrong with that speech, and that's true on, I think, regardless of the side that you're looking at. So but again, that's just an example of the high polarization of our society, and that people that have certain opinions, other people view them, regardless of the side, they view those opinions as completely horrific and terrible, and just and that explains also why, again, this is also coming from just those TV channels that people watch, and they keep trying to reinforce that view that those ideas are completely horrible and terrible. And I honestly wish, and this is why there's so much polarization, but I honestly wish these people, I know I said this before, that people just talk more to each other and try to understand where they're coming from. I actually have seen some of that during the Obama administration. Interestingly enough, there was somebody that I remember, I forgot which channel I saw this on, but somebody who voted for Obama, and somebody who kind of did not support the Affordable Health Care Act. And so this person, became a Republican and talked to one of the protester who was a Democrat, and had a peaceful conversation. There was no name calling, there was no yelling or screaming, none of that, like you're trying to destroy the country. And I when I remember looking at that, I'm like, gosh, I wish we had more of this. And they're just the level of polarization that we have. I mean, I don't even remember that during the Obama administration. I mean, it was never like this. Even though there was definitely plenty of hatred and plenty of full statements about Obama, how he supposedly was not born in the United States. And I know there were people hated him because his not because of his policies, but it was clear to me that people hated him because of his middle name, and because of the way he because of the color of his skin, and a bunch of other categories that had nothing to do whatsoever with his policies, which I found to be regrettable. I mean, I feel the same way when people attack Zoran Mamdani for being a Muslim, or for being an immigrant, and call for his deportation just because they don't agree with his views. I find it to be absolutely horrible. I mean, he is a citizen of the United States. And just because people don't agree with his views and don't like the fact that he was not born in the United States, or that he's a Muslim, they're calling for his deportation. I just find it to be absolutely horrific, this type of behavior. So,
and back to my other one of my points about whether teachers have their freedom of speech is protected under the Constitution or not. And it being that it's not a private institution, it's a public institution. And what do you think? And I don't know if you heard this yet, but Representative Nancy Mace, which, I mean, this is not the first time she's done something like this, but she wants to, this is exactly from her X account. We are urging the Secretary of Education to take decisive action to cut off federal funding from any elementary, secondary, or post-secondary educational institution refusing to hold teachers or administrators accountable for celebrating the murder of Charlie Kirk. We stand ready to work with the Secretary. And then I won't read the whole thing because it's very long. But so basically, if a teacher is found on their personal Facebooks or whatever celebrating the assassination, which, by the way, that celebrating is starting to get extremely broad, from like literally being happy about it to just criticizing Charlie Kirk, or criticizing even the investigation. I criticized the text messages that came up and how fake they sounded, and somebody said I'm a leftist and all this stuff and all these hateful things. I'm like, okay. It went from don't celebrate someone's death to basically just anyone who's questioning things, which is very suspicious to me. But she's saying that if a teacher's caught doing that and the teacher's not fired immediately, that they would cut off federal funding. And that's now using state power, right, to suppress speech of somebody who is working in education. So what is your thought on that?
Well, I mean, I definitely don't agree with that because the argument isn't that the federal government should not be involved in education. The argument it should be involved in education, but then the federal government should be discriminating against people, or rather punishing people, or start institutions for expressing because certain teachers express their point of view. So this is kind of. Uh, this really looks more like having a public policy where sort of the state is saying, well, these are the morals and values. This is our point of view, and you don't agree with it, and you don't do as we say, then the schools should lose federal funding. To me, that's it's almost like on the same level. I mean, it's not on the same level, but I definitely see a similarity that with people that are receiving the SNAP program, that then the state is going to be deciding which types of food they should be able to buy using the SNAP benefits. So basically, the state is the federal government rather is making decisions that, well, we're providing you the money, but we're going to pick and choose what you can do with the money that we're giving you. Yeah, no, I totally disagree with that. To me, that's that to me that would be an example of exactly what I said. This awfully does look similar to me, like to the SNAP program, where pretty much the state is saying that these are our morals and values, and you follow them. If not, you're going to lose funding. Yeah, no, I disagree with that. Either you make an argument that they should not be getting funding for reasons that have nothing to do with expressing one's opinion or one's personal preferences or choices, or you don't cut off any funding period. Or so it's either should be based on no one gets anything, right, or everyone gets it, but you can't just like pick and choose which part of it. We're giving you the money, but then we tell you what to do with it. Yeah, I don't agree with that at all. I would think that probably would. I don't know if this would violate the 14th Amendment, equal protection, but that just doesn't seem to be right to me. So
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you, and that's why I made the argument that yes, I understand that people have very, very high standards and expectations to the conduct of the teachers of their children, but also, to me, if something is being funded by the government, whether on a federal level or the state level or local level, it is now public, and their speech is now protected under the Constitution. If it was a private school or a Catholic school or something like that, they could make any standard they want and fire anyone for any reason because they are a private institution. But we're talking about public education here. So to me, as long as a teacher is doing it on their personal Facebooks or in their personal time or whatever, and not doing it in the classroom, I don't think they should be fired for that. But that's just my personal opinion. But now we're moving into let's destroy businesses that are private, fully private. Like I forget the name of the business, but they refused to print flyers for a vigil for Charlie Kirk, which is within their right. They can refuse to print things, and so now they're trying. The people who are mad about this, instead of just like boycotting that particular print shop, which I would support, I support boycotting. They're trying to like charge them with something. For not printing those flyers, and that's wrong because we keep talking about the same issues over and over, like the cake, baking the cake for the gay.
Right, baking the cake, exactly.
Wedding.
Yeah, it's very similar. Yeah. Like why don't they just boycott the place? Why it's like, well, you don't want to do what we want you to do, so now we would think you should be shut down. I mean that's to me that's actually when you mentioned it, that's the first thing that I thought of was actually
so that's why it's important to pay attention to these prominent figures, whether they're just commentators and just content creators, or they're actually in office. You have to don't forget the things that they say, hold them accountable, because these people, some of them, are the same people who wanted to force that bakery to or were complaining that the bakery wasn't baking the cake for the gay couple, but now they want to destroy this print shop who doesn't want to print those things. Which,
Right.
like if it was my print shop, I would just print them and take the money, because all money's green, I
Sure.
guess. But
No, no, absolutely.
they're within their right to do that.
Or they could find another print shop that would print those flyers.
Right. Or
Why
like Starbucks.
we're going to bankrupt you because you refused to do it as we want you to do. And I get the argument that customer's always right, but I mean, come on, like what about that? And I'm sure you heard about it. The one guy that wanted to have a Hitler's name be made on a cake or something, and the person refused. Like at some point, like come on. I mean, well, I'm not. It's not about an actual example. It's ultimately up to the up to the owner, right, of the shop, whether or not they want to do it. And they don't want to do it.
Well, another interesting example of this is this is starting to come up now, is salons, beauty salons that also do waxing for private areas. A lot of them aren't allowing their workers to wax men, and because of that, the reason for that is because there's a higher prevalence of men kind of making the situation awkward or sexually assaulting these people. So they just have a policy of just not waxing the private areas of men. Or in the particular case I'm bringing up, there's a wax shop or a salon that does waxing that is charging men like an exorbitant price for waxing in that particular area, as opposed to women getting the same service is like a reasonable, normal price. And there are certain groups, men's rights groups, that are saying this is discrimination. You can't do that. And to me, it's like, if it is a private business, they can refuse service to anyone for any reason. Like, you could just look at them wrong and they refuse service to you, and they're allowed to do that. Whether that business stays open, because of behavior like that, I mean, that's up to the consumer, but like they're allowed to do that from my perspective.
No, I totally agree. There's no argument there for me.
Yeah. So we only have about 3 minutes left. So I don't know if you want to kind of sum up what you've been doing with your campaign really quick.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So we have, I guess, the convention that we've been at the Sussex Day. That was on Sunday, and yeah, that went quite well. There was, the people showed up. There was actually one. So some of the people, they definitely took interest in my campaign. There wasn't anything. Wasn't really anything that was, hostile. But some people never heard of the Libertarian Party, so they got the information. And I think overall it was a positive experience. And we even had some of the people that stopped by. I remember that I've met previously before. So at the State Fair in Sussex. So no, overall, I thought it was a very positive experience. So we had kind of people that were definitely were welcoming in terms of my message. So they liked my message. So yeah, overall, I thought it was a positive experience.
Yeah, and we were actually set up next to the Tea Party table. So the Tea Party people came over and spoke with us, and obviously we have different views, and they had a giant poster of Trump. We don't support Trump, and that's fine. Everything was, really nice. They came over, they helped us with stuff, so it was a good experience. And there are people who don't realize the Libertarian Party exists in general, but or even in New Jersey. But we did have some registered libertarians come up to the table, and were excited that there were 2 libertarians to vote for in their area. So that was nice.
It was great. Yeah, I mean, there are people that they want to vote for a Libertarian candidate, and so they were definitely excited and happy they could vote for one. Yeah, and we had the same experience, of course, with the State Fair in Sussex as well. So yeah, it's definitely a positive experience for sure. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and one of the ladies from the Tea Party table came over and talked about how at this point we should be working together to have more options on the ballot and make ballot access easier and team up in that way. And I totally agree. we all benefit from having more options on the ballot, and there's no reason to not work together to achieve that. So I did appreciate that conversation I had with her about that. So, and then coming up, we went live today. We're going to go live tomorrow and Friday. We do have some guests that are lined up for tomorrow and Friday. People who want to ask big questions, people who want to ask me questions, just, regular people who have questions for the Libertarian candidates of New Jersey. If you want to be a guest, you can email me, message me, whatever, and I will get back to you as soon as I can. But other than that, we will see you next time. We'll see you tomorrow at the same time, 6:30. We were a little late today, got some technical difficulties, but normally we go live at 6:30. So have a good night, everybody.
Have a good night. It's been a pleasure. Night.